The lunch rush thinned the way a tide pulls back from shore, slowly at first, then all at once. Forks stopped clinking. Conversations faded into the hum of the refrigerator and the soft hiss of the coffee machine. Mara loosened the knot of her apron and glanced at the clock above the pass-through. 2:20, the longest hour of the day, had arrived. She picked up her rag and returned to the corner booth, the one by the window where the man had sat. He hadn't looked like trouble. He never did. Tailored charcoal suit, cufflinks that caught the light when he lifted his glass of water, a quiet voice that said please and thank you like they still mattered. No phone calls, no entourage, just him, reading the financial section as if it were a novel he'd already memorized. When he paid, he slid the black card across the table without ceremony. Mara noticed her reflection in its surface, tired eyes, a loose strand of hair escaping her bun. She'd smiled anyway, she always did. Now the receipt lay there, pale and final. Tip $0. The numbers seemed louder than the empty room. Mara stared at them longer than she should have, hoping they might rearrange themselves if she blinked hard enough. They didn't. Her chest tightened, a familiar pressure she'd learned to breathe through. Rent was due in 5 days. The pharmacy had already warned her no refill without payment. Her son's inhaler rattled when she shook it that morning, the sound too light, too hollow. She folded the receipt once, then again, as if making it smaller could make it hurt less. People thought waitressing was about plates and orders, but it was really about math, hours worked versus bills owed, kindness given versus kindness returned. Today's math wasn't working out. Mara wiped the table in slow circles, collecting crumbs he hadn't finished, the outline of his plate still warm. For a moment, resentment flared sharp and bright. Billionaire, the hostess had whispered earlier, owns half the skyline downtown, the kind of man money listened to. She pushed the thought away. Bitterness cost too much energy. Straightening the silverware, she reached for the plate, already planning her bus ride home, already rehearsing how she'd tell her son they'd stretch the inhaler just a little longer. Her fingers slid under the edge of the ceramic. That's when she felt it. Not empty, not light. Something was waiting underneath. The sound was faint, barely more than a whisper of metal against ceramic, but it stopped Mara cold. She lifted the plate a little higher, her fingers tightening around the rim as the weight shifted. The dish was heavier than it should have been, heavier than leftovers and crumbs and disappointment. Her heart began to pound, not fast but deep, each beat echoing in her ears. She turned the plate over. Taped carefully to the underside was a slim white envelope, its edges neat and precise like it had been measured before being cut. Next to it, secured with the same clear tape, rested a small brass key. It wasn't decorative, it wasn't flimsy, it was solid, the kind of key meant to open something important, something real. For a long moment, Mara simply stared. Her first instinct was panic. Her eyes flicked toward the front door, half expecting the man to step back inside to claim she'd misunderstood, that it was a mistake. But the door remained closed, the bell above it was silent. The street beyond the window shimmered with late afternoon heat, indifferent to her racing thoughts. She lowered the plate to the table, hands trembling now. Slowly, carefully, she peeled the tape away. The envelope came free first. It was heavier than paper should be, too, as if it carried more than just words. On the front, written in dark, deliberate ink, were the words, "For the one who kept smiling." Mara swallowed. She looked down at herself, the same faded apron she'd worn all week, a coffee stain near the hem, her name stitched in red thread by a manager who'd quit 2 years ago. Smiling was part of the job, smiling when feet ached, smiling when tips didn't come, smiling when the world seemed to count you invisible, but something about those words felt different, personal. Her fingers brushed the key. It was warm, as though it had absorbed the heat of the plate or maybe the weight of intention. She turned it in her palm, feeling the grooves bite gently into her skin. This wasn't spare change kindness. This was deliberate, planned. Questions crowded her mind. Why her? Why now? Was it a joke? A test? People didn't tape keys under plates. People didn't notice waitresses beyond refills and receipts. The manager's voice echoed from the kitchen, calling out an order. The normal sounds of the diner pressed back in, but they felt distant, muffled, as if Mara were underwater. She slid the envelope into her apron pocket and closed her hand around the key. Whatever this was, it had weight, not just in metal and paper, but in possibility. And possibility, she knew, could be the heaviest thing of all. Mara waited until the end of her shift to open the envelope. She didn't trust herself to read it sooner. All afternoon it pressed against her hip through the thin fabric of her apron, a constant reminder that something extraordinary was sitting quietly beside her ordinary life. Every time she moved, she felt it, light yet insistent, like a held breath. At last, the diner lights dimmed and chairs were flipped upside down on tables. The manager waved her off with a tired nod. Outside, dusk settled over the street, painting everything in soft purples and golds. Mara sat on the bus stop bench, the city humming around her, and finally slid the envelope open. The paper inside was thick, cream-colored, folded once with care. She recognized immediately that it was handwritten. The letters were steady, unhurried, shaped by someone who still believed handwriting mattered. I was once a kid raised by a waitress who never complained. Mara felt the words before she understood them. Her throat tightened. She imagined a woman balancing plates, swallowing exhaustion, choosing patience over bitterness because a child was watching. She wondered if that woman had ever known the impact of her silence, her strength. She kept reading. This key opens a safety box at First Harbor Bank. Use it for what matters most. Her breath caught. A safety box. The phrase felt unreal, like something borrowed from someone else's life, movies, maybe, or stories she didn't belong in. Her fingers curled tighter around the key as if it might vanish if she loosened her grip. The letter was brief, but the space between the lines felt full, heavy with intention. There was no signature, no name, just quiet certainty, as though the writer trusted the message to stand on its own. Then her eyes reached the final line. Tip the future. Her hands began to tremble. It wasn't just money, she realized. It was permission. Permission to hope without apology. Permission to think beyond next week's rent, beyond rationed medication and overdue notices. Permission to imagine a future not built entirely on endurance. Mara folded the letter slowly and pressed it to her chest. Around her, buses groaned and doors opened and closed, but she barely noticed. She thought of her son, asleep by now, his small chest rising and falling, trusting her to keep the world at bay. She thought of the dreams she'd packed away because dreaming had felt irresponsible. The key felt warmer in her palm. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel like something to survive. It felt like something to step into. The safety deposit box was smaller than Mara expected. It sat inside the bank vault like a quiet secret, unremarkable, its metal surface cool beneath her fingertips. A clerk stood nearby, polite and uninterested, a sosa if miracles were an everyday occurrence. Mara slid the key into the lock, her hands shaking so badly she had to steady herself against the counter. The box opened with a soft click. Inside was a single envelope. No jewels, no stacks of cash, just one thick, official-looking document. She lifted it carefully, afraid that too much hope might tear it. When she unfolded it, the words cashier's check seemed to glow on the page. The number beneath made her dizzy. It was more than relief, it was transformation. In the weeks that followed, life shifted in ways both sudden and quiet. Bills were paid in full, rent, utilities, balances that had once felt permanent. The pharmacy smiled when she picked up her son's inhalers, plural this time, no apologies required. She watched him run at the park without fear tightening her chest, and she cried when she got home, the kind of tears that come from release, not pain. But the money didn't just erase the past, it built something new. Mara returned to the notebook she'd hidden in a kitchen drawer, the one filled with margins crowded by sketches of ovens, counters, and display cases. For years, the bakery had lived only there, a foolish dream, she'd told herself. Now it became paperwork, permits, paint samples, early mornings that felt purposeful instead of punishing. The day she unlocked the door to her own shop, her hands were steady. Sunlight spilled across fresh tiles. The bell above the door chimed, clear and welcoming, a sound that belonged to her. She stood still for a moment, breathing it in, the smell of sugar and yeast, the quiet pride of ownership. Customers came, some stayed, some didn't, but every one of them was met with the same smile. Behind the counter, taped where only she could see it, was the letter. The paper had softened with time, creased and familiar. On hard days, she read it again and remembered where she'd started. Mara never learned the man's name. She didn't need to. His gift had done what it was meant to do. It changed everything, and then it kept going.